So Bob Woodward's account of the Trump White House has already sold more than 750,000 copies. And according to some other media outlets, it's already sold more than 1 million. Before his book, Fear, it was Michael Wolff's Fire and Fury that got a lot of buzz and sold more than 1 million copies. The pace of sales of Fear, which includes print, ebooks, and an audio edition, is among the fastest in memory for a non-fiction work. Fear has pretty much dominated political news last couple of days. The book portrays Trump as an ill-informed and dishonest president, and the West Wing staff as trying to minimize the damage. Pretty much what you've been saying, right? But didn't we already hear this kind of story before? It was pretty much the same as what Fire and Fury and other anti-Trump books were claiming. The president has condemned Fear as a joke, fiction, and a scam. And it seems like everybody in the White House is on the Trump's camp, and they are attacking Woodward's work as fiction. From Secretary of Defense Jim Mattis, White House Chief of Staff John Kelly, former White House Economic Advisor Gary Cohn, and former Staff Secretary Rob Porter and others has all disputed Woodward's book. Hi, I'm Michael Wan, your host for Michael Wan's Op-Ed Live, and this is your LA County Assessor Jeffrey Prang, who is running for re-election this coming November. Our show Op-Ed Live is not about left or right, it's about right or wrong. So what say you, Jeffrey?
So I think the Woodward book is a very important contribution to the debate over Donald Trump and the White House. The previous book by Fire and Fury said things that sounded
shaky, right?
They confirmed what people were thinking and what we were hearing anecdotally. But I found Mr. Wolff to be not a particularly credible message carrier. And he seemed, the more he spoke, the less I had confidence in him. But what Woodward is saying is identical. But Woodward, his reputation is beyond dispute. And I know the president is trying to undermine him now, but Woodward has had a solid reputation since he led the Watergate investigation. And one of the good things that Woodward does is he records everybody. So the documents and the evidence behind of his interviews are pretty revealing. He even had a conversation with the president, who the president said he was credible until he criticized him, and now he's not credible. But it paints a very alarming view of what's going on in the White House, combined with that anonymous New York Times story last week, the op-ed, where it sounds like there's a lot of people in the White House who are as alarmed at what's going on with the president as is being conveyed in the book.
Yeah, I think in Michael Wolff's case, I think there were factual errors that came out, especially when he talked about that John Boehner, that Donald Trump didn't even know who John Boehner was, but actually they found out that he played golf with John Boehner like years back. So that was obviously a lie, and it seems like you said, I saw many of his interviews, Michael Wolff's interviews, and he didn't come off as a credible guy.
Right.
But regarding Bob Woodward, everybody respects him, especially, you know, I do know that the liberal media, they worship him. Like, he's the symbol of great journalism, right? Everybody knows Bob Woodward. There has even been movie made about him, right?
Yeah.
All the President's Men back in the 70s, right? With Robert Redford and Dustin Hoffman playing those roles. One of the guys played Carl Bernstein, right?
That's right.
Was it Dustin?
Dustin Hoffman played Carl Bernstein, and Robert Redford played Woodward.
Yeah. So nobody's attacking his reputation about it. And so far, it seems like there is no factual errors like what Michael Wolff committed. So probably it's all true. I did read some excerpts of it, and it didn't come off as fiction. I would say that. I would say, because Donald Trump has been talking about those stories about, I focused on that story about South Korea, that Donald Trump was asking Jim Mattis, how come we have to even have soldiers there? I mean, why are we, because he already asked those questions even during his campaign. Right. So I don't think that would be, you know, fake. I don't think that those are fakes. But probably when Jim Mattis, the Watergate reporter, I mean, I just copied this quote. Bob Woodward wrote that Jim Mattis once described President Trump as having the understanding of a 5th or a 6th grader when it comes to the Korean Peninsula. But these kind of comments, I'm not sure whether he really said it or not. Seems like Jim Mattis disputed. He said that he denied all of these things, and it's just pure fiction.
Well, the one thing that a lot of individual comments being attributed to individuals in the White House, of course they're going to deny it. They work for President Trump. I think what's more important and more telling is the fact that the stories of dysfunction, about the president's disinterest in details and specifics, those are common themes we've been hearing since he was in the campaign and all through the White House. And those are all very believable. And the way he conducts foreign policy and domestic policy would seem to reinforce that belief. I think it would be, I don't know what I'm talking about in this regard, but people in a work environment, if it's dysfunctional, they will talk about the boss, they will talk about the dysfunction.
Well, who doesn't, right?
And
right?
they usually talk about it in a private setting and hope that it doesn't get repeated. But as water cooler talk often gets repeated, and then they're embarrassed and they have to say, no, I didn't say that. And
but I would say this: if you are doing an interview with Jim Mattis, then you would know that it will be recorded. And it would be one day probably printed out as a book or an article, so they would have the intention to damage the president.
I believe the quotes he's putting in there, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the quotes are not, Mattis did not say that directly to Woodward. He said that to somebody else who reported that to Woodward.
That is how it works.
I would imagine.
There was a middle guy.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody's going to say these really horrible things to the actual reporter, and of course they're going to deny that. But his book is both from having actual interviews as well as having people repeat back what's being said.
But like you said, when person A says something to person B, and when that person B says something to person C, the story can sometimes change. I mean, that happens in real life.
Of course.
So probably that happened here. But this is what Defense Secretary James Mattis said on Tuesday. He pushed back against the passage concerning him in journalist Bob Woodward's forthcoming book, calling it fiction and the product of someone's rich imagination. So he disputed. And the Chief of Staff, John Kelly, I have a little bit more respect to people who served for the military, so I think they tend to not, they tend to try to be more honest than politicians. So I just take him as at his word.
If there were a couple of comments being made, I would think one thing, but now there's such a preponderance of evidence that numerous people who worked for the Trump White House, from Rex Tillerson to Mattis, to John Kelly, all these comments being very critical of the president. If it was one or two, I might dismiss that. But there's too many.
And you think it all connects.
Exactly. Bob Woodward's not just making this stuff up. Wolf, I don't think, was making it up either, but his lack of credibility undermined his own arguments.
How about Omarosa's book? Unhinged.
I think,
it hit the New York Times #1 list.
I think Omarosa I don't hold her in terribly high esteem.
Do you put her higher than Michael Wolff? I would put Michael Wolff higher than Omarosa.
It depends. I don't believe that she is lying, but I also don't,
would you say that she's a credible person? To me,
I don't think she doesn't come across as credible.
She's very manipulative and very cunning, and I think she just changes her position every single time.
I believe that's the case, but I don't believe that she's lying about the dysfunction in the White House. I believe her perceptions of things, I believe those because they're consistent with what everybody else is saying. The stories, there may be differences around the edge. There may be some stories that Wolf wrote that were not verifiable, but the overall theme always remains consistent. Trump is disengaged. He's disinterested in details. It's fairly dysfunctional. And they have to, and a lot of people have to intervene to try to keep him from following his worst impulses.
It seems at least on the media reports that is the case, that many people seem to claim that, or at least in private, rather not in public. But this is, like you said, Mattis said, the contemptuous words about the president attributed to me in Woodward's book were never uttered by me or in my presence. That's what he said. And while I generally enjoy reading fiction, this is a uniquely Washington brand of literature, and its anonymous sources do not lend credibility. So I do think there's some kind of problem there. I think Trump, in a way, he can't complain about it. He chose Jeff Sessions as his attorney general, right? And he decided to recuse himself, and that's how Rod Rosenstein got into the picture, and he appointed Robert Mueller, special counsel, by the recommendation of also James Comey, which is kind of a weird recommendation. They recommend each other to be fired and get, special counsel. So it's ultimately, whether they betrayed or not, it was his decision to hire him. And also with this, somehow these kind of stories keeps on coming. It's not stopping. I don't think it will ever stop. Probably, I don't, if Trump even wins re-election, I think these kind of stories will not stop. That's what I think. And somehow there is some kind of dysfunction, at least in some portion. That is obvious.
One of the observations I have is that people, I don't agree with Jeff Sessions, but Jeff Sessions has operated within the political arena for many, many years, decades, as has most people who worked in the White House. And they, I don't know how to describe this. I heard a Republican consultant say during the campaign, he said, I'm supporting Hillary Clinton, not because I like her or agree with her, but she at least plays in the same sandbox as the rest of us. So a lot of the people who work for Trump are accustomed to playing in the sandbox within the parameters that we all understand. Trump is outside those parameters. So each time he does something, they want to respond, to use conventional wisdom, conventional standards to respond, and, and then he constantly goes off the rail again. So Sessions did exactly what Sessions was supposed to do. He was involved in the campaign. He should have recused himself. Everything worked the way it should have worked. And then Trump decided he didn't like that because he wanted the Attorney General to be his advocate, and that's not the job of the Attorney General.
I agree with your point. I agree with you like around 50% about what you said, about the fact that they have this normal sand, where they used to play. They used to play this playground, and Trump is playing here. So obviously, there's gonna be dysfunction happening. Probably, everybody should have predicted that this will happen. But regarding the Jeff Sessions recusing himself, I just didn't understand it, because when the Russians came, when the Russian diplomats came to Washington, D.C., they met with President Obama at that time, and also other Democratic senators too, not just Jeff Sessions. So it seems like that was just a regular meeting, and it wasn't him meeting with them privately. His deputies were there in presence too, so I don't think it was a big problem. And if he wanted to, if he viewed himself as a problem, as somebody who would have been involved in at least in optics, that he would be involved with Russia, then he should have told President Trump in advance that I think I should not be Attorney General from the get-go. That's what I think. That's my take on that.
I don't know that. Well, one, he's not. He didn't recuse himself because he was involved. He recused himself because he played a role on the campaign that had interface, and this investigation required a third-party review. He could not credibly say he was third-party, and any good attorney would recuse himself, as he did. I think that was a standard ethical move. But at the same time, Trump should not have been looking to appoint an attorney general whose job is to insulate him from the investigation.
So we'll go to our next topic, so we can dig in deeper about this. This is from Town Hall. So this week, Representative Mark Meadows released new text messages between former FBI employee Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, showing that the two colluded together in a strategic media release to damage President Trump. Meadows released text messages that show Strzok had nothing on Trump and he knew it. Strzok texted Page to discuss a media leak strategy. His comment is exhibit number 1, describing that there is no evidence of collusion, but he needed something to drive down public opinion. Therefore, calculated media leaks occurred to legacy media outlets. In this case, the leaks were lies. The importance of Strzok's position in the FBI cannot be understated. He was the deputy director of counterintelligence and lying to left-wing media outlets because he knew they would run with the story. Strzok was overtly attempting a soft coup using news publications. Your thought on this, Jeffrey?
Well,
so we can continue with this.
Sure. I've not read that story, so I can't respond
It's pretty much just more leaks between them.
Yeah, but
having a media leak strategy.
Sure.
But that was the issue. FBI agents talking about a media leak strategy.
So just a couple things. One is Representative Meadows is probably the most radical right-wing.
He's a right-wing
member of Congress. I have not found him to be terribly credible. Okay. So the fact that he is
But these texts are credible. So DOJ didn't refute it.
So there's. Let me speak in more general terms about Strzok. What I have observed about Strzok is that he was an FBI agent doing a job who had private opinions and was dating somebody or having an affair with somebody who had private opinions about Donald Trump. And they, in a private capacity, shared those and exchanged text messages about their dislike of Donald Trump. But I have not seen anything to indicate that they have used their official position to try to undermine the investigation. And he also does not represent the FBI. He represents Strzok, not FBI leadership. It would be whatever it was he was doing was that of, at best, was that of a rogue agent.
So you do think that he deserved at least to be fired because of him going rogue?
No, I think.
And according to this report, I'll just add this. When they were talking about media leaking strategy, the next day, Washington Post talked about Carter Page, being one of the persons who might have colluded with Russia. So it seems like the timing kind of matched with what they were saying. Even though it was private, they used a public phone too, right? If they use an FBI phone, then that's pretty much. That can be open to public, right? So they should have had that in mind.
So
too, right?
the biggest violation that I'm aware of, where they should have been disciplined, is that they used FBI-issued phones to conduct private political conversations. A government phone is supposed to be used for government purposes. That is usually not, in terms of government, in terms of discipline, that doesn't usually result in termination. Usually that would result in a verbal reprimand or a letter to your file, or in worst case, maybe a suspension. Not termination. Now, I haven't seen these.
Even though in this kind of case, what if their media leaking strategy, they were just talking it in private, but they actually had some concrete evidence that they did give it to sources? Seems like they were talking about Washington Post and New York Times, so they leaked that information to the Washington Post, and then Lisa Page said New York Times reporters are complaining about that. So
if you do have people working for the FBI who who are leaking information, now I think it's important to state it was not an FBI leaking strategy. If there were things leaked, it was a Strzok leaking strategy.
Not that you're saying he's gone rogue,
he himself was making those decisions. Now, one thing, and I'm not defending that because it's wrong, and if that is the case, then there would be justification to terminate him, because it is an intelligence agency, and the information that they have should be belong to the agency and not be, individuals should not be deciding who to release it to. The one thing we know in Washington, D.C. is that there are huge numbers of people who leak. In the Trump White House, in fact, most of the stuff that we see in the Bob Woodward book are Trump's own employees of the White House who are telling these things off the record. There is actually an unprecedented number of people in the administration compared to past administrations who are releasing damaging information to the media.
No doubt.
So it's particularly bad coming from an intelligence agency. It is really alarming that so many people who work directly for Trump believe that they need to release confidential information to the media.
Do you think that, so it seems like they investigated Lisa Page. I mean, they did a hearing with her, a closed-door hearing with Lisa Page, and they had a closed hearing also with Peter Strzok, and also an open hearing. And I believe there will be some kind of investigation about this because it's very damaging. What if they find out, and according to their testimonies, that upper people were involved? For instance, Rod Rosenstein. What if Sally Yates were involved? What if President of the United States was involved? Because one of the texts said Peter Strzok told Lisa Page, the POTUS, you know POTUS, what it stands for, President of the United States wants to know everything what's going on. That was also one of the texts. So if it goes all the way up there, does it have to be, so do we have to investigate all that? What do you think?
Well, it's hard to talk about hypotheticals, but Actually, one thing you did state that is also kind of alarming, when the POTUS wants to know everything, the president's not supposed to know it. When there's investigations, the president's not supposed to be involved. However, this is not the first time I've heard this. Other people have said that he wanted to be kept informed on this investigation, and actually he called people into his office maybe a couple of months ago.
Obama or Trump?
Trump.
Okay, when they were talking about POTUS, this was happening during the Obama term.
Okay,
So to me that is alarming. Yeah. The POTUS should be, he should take his hands off. He's not supposed to intrude in some kind of investigating.
There's a difference here, though. For Trump being involved, because Trump may be a subject of the investigation, being involved is alarming. Obama, there is a legitimate reason for him to be aware, because he was in the position during the election. Do I need to have information to release to the public about the possibility of the Russians interfering with our elections? He needed to be aware of that, because he needed to make a decision whether to release that to the public or not. He chose not to, which I think is a mistake. But there is a legitimate law enforcement reason why he should be kept informed about the status of that investigation.
I kind of feel that Obama did not care about the Russian meddling up until Trump won the election. So I think if he wanted to know something, what was being investigated by Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, it has something more to do with Donald Trump rather than the Russian meddling. So I feel like there should be some kind of investigation going on. I don't know whether there is. There's U.S. District Attorney John Huber in Utah. He's investigating the Uranium One scandal and Hillary email scandal. They're supposed to be, but it seems like I don't know what he's doing, but. I think to me it feels very alarming. I'm not just saying it because it's President Trump. If whoever the president is, I don't think FBI investigators should go rogue like this. They should try to at least play down the middle. And Peter Strzok and Lisa Page should have known better. They were using an FBI phone. If they want to talk smack about Trump, they should have used their private phones.
No, I agree. So we don't really disagree the fact that these two agents have some problems and discipline was required. But this is a sideshow. The big show is that Donald Trump and his associates, many of his associates, people on his campaign, people he did business with, have now been indicted, and some of them have pled guilty and are being sentenced.
Paul Manafort, right?
We're talking about Manafort. We're talking about Gates. We're talking about Flynn. We're talking about all these other people.
We know that, but
these two guys were a sideshow in the bigger thing. The fact is that Trump and his administration is the most corrupt administration this nation's ever had.
Probably he chose the wrong person by choosing Paul Manafort as his campaign manager, right? That was what his position was. But Paul Manafort, when he was charged by Robert Mueller, he was charged by something that happened 12 years ago. That was a bank fraud. And
so
what I'm saying is Donald Trump didn't know anything about him back then. Paul Manafort was a known figure. He was known to be a Reagan advisor, Bob Dole advisor.
A Russian advisor.
He was one of the ultimate establishment figures. So that's why he hired him. He only worked in the Trump campaign for 100 days. So I think he was not as much as an important figure. And if what he did was wrong, I would say that. Bank fraud or money laundering. If he did really what he did, I think it was wrong, and they should be punished for it. But it seems to me like this whole the Russia-Trump collusion thing is a witch hunt, because Robert Mueller keeps charging people that has nothing to do with Russia. That had nothing to do with Russia. It was totally unrelated to Russia. They wanted to get something on Trump. Even the judge Ellis, he was the one who took care of that case. Even he said that you're not trying to you don't want to do anything with Paul Manafort. All you guys want to do is impeach Trump. So even for the judge to say that, it seems like there's something onto it. And Michael Flynn, he didn't get charged yet, right? He's cooperating.
He pled guilty to for lying to the FBI.
Did you know that Peter Strzok said that he believed that Michael Flynn didn't lie?
So Peter Strzok is a relatively modest player in this game.
He was a lead investigator.
He was an investigator. And if you know what the term investigator means, he's a beat cop.
So he was a lead investigator, but I would tell you that he was let go by Robert Mueller.
So let's talk about the bigger picture. Donald Trump, as president, said he is going to bring in the best people.
Yeah. He said that, but he didn't do that.
And he did not do that.
I agree with you on that.
And just let's look at the laundry list of people who are close or adjacent to the president. George Papadopoulos pled guilty to lying to the FBI. Sam Pattern, a lobbyist connected to Manafort, pled guilty for failing to register as this is part of the Mueller investigation. Paul Manafort, in jail, convicted by a jury. Michael Cohen, the president's attorney, pled guilty to tax evasion, bank fraud, campaign violations. Rick Gates, deputy campaign manager, pled guilty to financial fraud and lying to the FBI. Alex van der Zwaan, a lawyer who worked for Manafort and Gates, pled guilty to lying to investigators. Richard Pinedo, guilty of identity fraud. He was another campaign associate of Trump. Michael Flynn pled guilty to lying to the FBI. And on top of that, we have 13 Russian nationals who were convicted of conspiracy to defraud the United States.
Trump, though.
These are separate. These are all things that were related to the campaign, that were connected to people, that were connected to people who were close to.
I would say this. Yeah, George Papadopoulos, he got 14 days sentence.
Right.
They say he was a focal point, but 14 days seems like not that much of a huge deal to me compared to other things.
It doesn't matter. He was guilty.
George Papadopoulos, he came out on Fox News and he did an interview and he said, and they asked him, hey, why did you even lie then? And he said, I don't know. I got caught in the moment. That's what he said. You're right. Trump did pick some bad apples and he was one of them. I'm George Papadopoulos. To me, it seems like it's so easy to charge people. You know, special counsel, FBI, if they want to bring somebody down, I believe anybody can be brought down. Like if
these are serious charges. These are serious charges. This is not incidental charges.
If one person says something and you have another witness saying another, you can charge this person. If you're if you are the investigator and you say, I don't think what he's saying is true. I mean, I think this guy is telling the truth. Then you can charge this person. That's pretty much what's happening. It's like he said, she said. So, but anyway, George Papadopoulos, he was not an important figure in the Trump campaign. He was one of the volunteers.
Just like Strzok was not important. Just like Strzok was not important in the investigation.
Was the lead investigator for the Hillary email scandal and also the Trump.
But he was removed from the Russia collusion early.
He was removed. No.
Very early. No, very early in the campaign.
In the special counsel team.
He was appointed. He was not on the special counsel team very long.
He was a lead investigator for the special counsel team, but then
for a very short period of time,
got informed by Michael Horowitz, who was the inspector general, and he showed these texts
and he was
to Mueller. That's why he removed him.
So he's equivalent in terms of importance to the FBI as George Papadopoulos
was just a low-level figure. Papadopoulos said he never even met with Donald Trump.
But Michael, look at this list of people. Look at all these allegations, but you're trying to make it sound that. Look at the guys over here who are accusing Trump. Don't look at all the corruption that's around him, all of his advisors who are so corrupt, all the things going on in the White House. This is evidence of a man who is out of control, who has got people in the White House who are afraid of him, who are leaking information in an unprecedented amount of time. This administration is dangerous.
I will say this. These people, probably they did something wrong, so they deserve what
it's a lot of people, though.
They deserve what they deserve, but it seems like this doesn't connect the dots with President Trump. Ultimately, that's why they can't even charge him. That's why there's nothing going on.
But the investigation's not done yet.
Even Rudy Giuliani, who's working as an attorney for President Trump, Giuliani said he hasn't been contacted by Mueller team for over a month. Seems like it's dead end. I think they met the dead end. There is nothing more. I believe that it's already the investigation is in its third year right now. They didn't find any single evidence or any single witness that connects Trump with Russia. I see so many other connections between the Democratic Party, like I already told you about the Uranium One scandal, and and getting the Trump dossier from the Russians. I see. Isn't that also collusion? To me, that seems like a collusion with Russia. But it seems like the liberal media just tend to focus on what's bad on Trump and not on the Democratic Party. I feel like you have to call balls, balls, and strikes, strikes. To me, that is the most important thing. I tell people if Trump does something bad, I would criticize him about that. But this FBI and the Department of Justice should be impartial, right? You agree with that?
Yes,
right?
I do.
They should be, but it seems like they are not, and that's what I'm calling.
See, I don't agree with that. I think they are being impartial, and I think where there's been evidence of impartiality, they've dealt with it appropriately. I also think qualitatively there's a big difference between the things you've raised about what the Democrats have done and what's gone on with Donald Trump. This investigation, which you are dismissing as having not provided any evidence, one is they've convicted a dozen people of a lot of charges, which indicates that the president surrounds himself by criminals and scoundrels. And secondly, the investigation's not done yet, and I don't believe that they haven't found anything. I believe they are connecting the dots, waiting till they have sufficient evidence in order to make the allegations. The FBI, the Justice Department, is not like the local police department. They're slow, they're cautious, and they make sure they have a number of data points to confirm their case before they release it.
Too, right? Like Peter Strzok and Lisa Page were bad apples. I would have to say that.
I believe, yes, I think that's not an unfair characterization, but I think they are incidental compared to the gravity of the people who are on this list, who are close to the president and are his chosen advisors, his best people.
Okay, so I think we should agree to disagree.
Yes, I think so.
Okay, well, that's our show for today. Our show is not about left or right, it's about right or wrong. To stay up to date with our latest videos, make sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel by clicking subscribe. Thanks for tuning in. Thank you, Jeffrey.